Hi, and welcome to Chapter 10, Measuring Change. We talked last chapter about change, but if you need to measure it, like when Deming taught the Japanese how to change the way they produce cars, because as he used to say in his speeches, if you can't measure it, how do you know you're making it any better? All right, so we're going to talk about measurement and control process. We'll talk about strategy maps we can use, and we'll talk about different measurement tools we can use. So we're getting pretty far into this thing, right? We're talking about institutionalization of these changes down here as we track and measure change over time. So last chapter I talked about SMART goals. This is in our textbook, but it's very useful to know. You see so many poorly designed goals out there. Right? I thought it'd be worth it to take a minute or two and think about what kind of goals are reasonable and useful. So I want this thing as soon as possible. Terrible goal. You should save as much money as possible. Or I want this thing ASAP, right? All those are terrible goals. I don't know what to do with that. If you tell me you want something right now and I don't have it, what does right now mean? Does right now mean 5 minutes from now? Does that mean today? Does that mean this week? I have no idea what you're talking about. So people who set goals or people who receive goals should ask questions about those goals till the goal is better defined, and then the acronym you hear in business all the time is a SMART goal. First of all, the goal is specific. I know exactly what you're talking about. It is measurable. I have a way to measure this goal. I know what the current performance is, and then I have in the specific goal is what the future desired performance is, and I have a way to measure if I have achieved that. Right? The goal is attainable. Right? It is if I think the person who's been given that goal think the goal is impossible, I'll just ignore it and I will go try to do something I can be successful at because I know I'm going to fail this and I'm going to get in trouble, so I better have some wins in my category. So I'll go try to something I can be successful at. Right? It should be relevant and I should think it's important. I should understand why it's important to the organization. And again, you get to the burning platform thing. I should understand the value of this thing and why it is a big deal. And timely or time-based, right? Every goal should have a time associated with it. So I want this thing in 2 months. I want this thing in 8 months. I want this thing, 2 days from tomorrow or whatever. Everything should have a time wrapped around it. Otherwise, it just hangs out there indefinitely. And as I said in last chapter, if someone doesn't have a date when they know they can finish something, then they should give a date of when they'll know the date, right? And if that doesn't work, you just keep setting goals for them, setting dates for them. So an example of a poorly designed goal I see sometimes is we want to improve our customer service. Well, what does that mean? Right? So first of all, it's not measurable at all. So let's get a measurement. So we had a customer survey that said our customers were, 83% satisfied or extremely satisfied. And so the specific goal is we want to improve our customer service so we can increase our customer survey score from 83% to, say, 90%. Okay, that's still not a SMART goal, right? So is 83 to 90% attainable? Well, I don't really know the circumstances in this made-up situation, but it sounds like it's a challenge, but it doesn't sound impossible. If you told me you wanted 100% satisfied customers and we're 83% now, I would say absolutely not. It's very unlikely you're going to get 100% of anything, and that's not a very good goal. The one thing that goal missing if we increase from 83 to 90% is time. By when? By the end of the month? By the end of the year? And again, that gets back to attainable. If you tell me you want to increase from 83 to 90% by the end of the month, that's highly unlikely, right? If you're going to tell me you want it 12 months from now that high, I got a chance, right? I got a fighting chance. Let's go after it. See what we can do. So all the goals should have a time on them. Otherwise, imagine that you told me I had increased the customer satisfaction to 90%, but didn't give me a date. And come to me at the end of the month and say, do you have it yet? Nope. Well, then you're late. No, I'm not. No date. 6 months from now, still not late. A year from now, still not late. 3 years from now, still not late. Right? It just becomes silly. So you need a date attached to these goals of when they're to be completed. Can control processes be used to facilitate change? Right. So often change agents will complain about the way we measure stuff at work impede change because they're set up to measure the current thing. So sometimes we need to use them or change them so they'll be measuring change. So for instance, let's say our goal was to, this big reorg change is to improve our quality. We're just mediocre in quality. We've got to improve things. But we have a metric in place that said the managers must ship so much work at the end of every month or they're going to get in big trouble. Quality or not, they're going to ship it because they know the consequences to their career are swift and severe. So they're going to ship it no matter what. Well, those two things are at odds, and we really can't have a change push for quality where we might have to hold things and make them better. And meanwhile, managers are getting knocked down for holding things back and missing shipments and not making their numbers for the month. So we might need to change the metrics in the system to support the new way of doing things. But so the second bullet, but if we change these things, they can be powerful aids in how we go about change things. But we gotta understand how this thing works. And so we have to look at the existing controls and see what that's going to do to influence our change initiative, right? There's an old saying in business that says, tell me how you're going to measure me and I'll tell you how I'm going to behave. So am I going to get rewarded just for showing up, or do I have to do a certain thing, or have to behave a certain way? Maybe I get rewarded for not making mistakes. Okay, then watch me try real hard not to do anything so there's no possibility of error, right? So you need to be very careful about the existing controls and how they figure into it, right? And then you got to align new controls with new measures with this new change. That means you got to talk to HR, you got to talk to upper management, you got to talk to your stakeholders, right? That is important to look at the controls that are in place and understand some of them will need to be modified to support the new change so that you get the behaviors you want. Because again, tell me I'm going to be measured and I'll tell you how I'm going to behave. So these measures should focus on key factors, right? What are the key things we're after? Don't go measuring 17 things, people lose track of it, right? Usually 3 to 5 key factors are all you can keep in your head. Right? In normal goal setting philosophy, these goals should be challenging but achievable, right? People don't work very hard on goals that aren't challenging. Like, oh, we'll get to it later, we can do that easily, and then maybe it happens, maybe it doesn't. Or if it's not achievable, again, they'll go work on something that is achievable. So it should be we call it stretch goals, right? These measures should be fair and appropriate. Try to avoid sending mixed signals like you're still going to have some old measures that work against the new measures, like the managers are going to get in trouble if they refuse to ship bad quality products by the end of the month and they didn't make their monthly shipments, right? So you need to get that stuff worked out of the system. You got to have a measurement, you got an information system that delivers measures that are accurate and useful, the data that comes in. So we got to look at how we're going to measure stuff and how that's going to work. Right? And then remember that when we measure things, there's a certain precision how well we can measure it, defines the ability, and maybe we don't need to be that precise. Maybe we don't need to be so exact on what's exactly going on or when things left. The important thing is to get things moving in the right direction. So often in the early stages, right, we have this early stage of change. What's going to happen, right? What are we changing? And we're changing like goals. And then how? So we're going to measure progress and effectiveness of these new processes that we're changing. And at the late thing, we're going to so then we start looking for the next thing, how we're going to change things in the future. But so we focus on what we're going to change and then how we're going to change it and how we're going to measure that progress. So it's kind of the key point there. Right. Sometimes we have strategy maps, which are visual representation to show these things we're after. These are nice because they can, remember, communication is very important. These are nice because they do a good job of communicating, hopefully, what it is we're after, how our things are going to work. So an example would be here's a strategy, how it links together financial perspective, customer perspective, internal processes, and learning and growth. Right, and this is called the balanced scorecard. We'll see a balanced scorecard in just a minute here, but this will give you an idea how these things, these are the different areas we looked at, and we're going to feed into there human capital, information, and organizational capital to feed all into that to a big interactive strategy chart that looks like this. Well, I don't know about interactive, but it's certainly a huge chart with lots of things going on, and you see how we figure about the government focus and public relationship and how management figures into all this. And so there's a lot going on in this chart, but at the end we can boil it down into back to a simpler chart where again we talked about we're going to use this vision strategy, how it affects customers, financials, internal business processes, and learning, because we got to get better. We know we have to get better because our competitors are getting better. And we end up with a generic scorecard, that looks a little bit more like this. So we have objectives for each of these areas, and those are the things we're measuring, and those are the things we're going after. By the way, I really do like the the balanced scorecard from the standpoint of, I teach this when I teach strategy. it doesn't say just financial measures, but it says to appear financially successful, how should we appear to our stakeholders? So what is it our stakeholders want? Not what we think, the managers think our objectives should be. What do our stakeholders think our objectives should be? And again, I want to be a billionaire overnight is not a realistic goal. So what are realistic goals for our stakeholders? What do they think we should be doing? Over here, customers, to achieve our change vision, how should we appear to our customers? Not how do we want to be, but how are we going to appear to our customers? What do they want to see? What face are we going to present to them? So think about if you're going to ask your customers how you appear, what would they say? All right, it's kind of give you an interesting, a little bit different take on how to look at things. Over to the right, internal business processes. To achieve our change vision, what processes do we need to excel at? So what do we need to change? What do we need to do good at? And that takes us to learning and growth. So maybe we got to have new processes over here on the right. So we've got to learn new processes. We've got to grow in certain areas. So we in the organization should plan to change. We know the organization is not the same as it was 20 years ago. It's not the same as it was 10 years ago or 5 years ago. We know it's going to be different in the future. So knowing it's going to be different in the future, are we going to let change haphazardly catch us off guard? Or are we going to act like we have some brains and we're going to look to the past and say, yes, change happens over and over again. Therefore, it's going to happen in the future. Let's get ready for it. All right. So I really do like this balanced scorecard approach to planning strategy. It's not the only one, and I'm not saying it's the best one, but it certainly gives you some things to think about on customer, stakeholders, internal processes, how it is we work, and that includes how the employees work, and then what are we going to do to get better. Right, so these two, the learning and growth and the internal business processes, are what you do to appear certain ways to customers and certain ways to your stakeholders. Because at the end of the day, those are the two groups you've got to satisfy. Absolutely. All right, some factors that lead to risk. We've talked about the risk involved in change management and organizational change, and certainly the more pressure on the leaders. If there's significant, there's always going to be pressure on them, but if there's significant pressure, that can lead to more risk. And certainly this second bullet, higher levels of ambiguity, right? What is it you're trying to do? So again, you go back to SMART goals. Make things as specific as possible and get some experienced leaders that have changed. And if you can't, if your experienced people don't have time to be on the change effort full time, then put them on part-time, put them on as stakeholders, put them on as mentors or coaches or something, so that the less experienced team has somebody to talk to, particularly when there's trouble. Change culture. Risk increases when you go to change the culture when the reward for taking the risk are high, or any risk are high, right? We talked about how risky this is and making changes, so the employees got to know they're protected from consequences when the good intentioned people take smart risk and they don't work out. If senior executives hate to hear bad news, they shoot the messenger. Even worse, then we got some issues there. We got some serious issues at trying to change our culture, right? And if there's internal competition between units, sometimes managers feel that is a good thing to do. Just remember, if I want to win the race, if I can't speed up, my other way to win the race is to slow you down. So I might resort to means of slowing the other person down as opposed to making myself run more efficient, more effective. And that, of course, is exactly what the owners don't want. But if you pit me against somebody else and I'm determined to win, that might be a choice some of us take. Right. In terms of information management increases when the situation is very complex, very fast changing. The gaps in diagnosis means there's areas where we don't know what's going on, which is really bad. And if the decision making is decentralized, you get people all over the map making all kinds of decisions, and it's very haphazard and scattered. That's certainly an issue too. And sometimes you look at this DICE factor when it comes to controlling this kind of stuff. DICE, duration, integrity, commitment, and effort. So the duration is the amount of time this change is going to happen. Integrity, the extent to which a company can rely on teams of managers to make these changes. Commitment from the top management, and amount of effort people are willing to put into this. All right, which takes us to this focus. Right, again, we can use this selection of measures of control to improve efficiency and effectiveness. Remember, efficiency is doing things the right way, most bang for the buck. Effectiveness is doing the right things. I want to work on the right things. If you have very smart people working very hard on the wrong things, it has no effectiveness, right? It just doesn't help you. So you need to be sure you have smart people working on the right things. And the bottom one, right? Careful selection and use of metrics. Remember, be careful what you measure, because those are the results you're going to get. Those are the things people are going to work to improve, maybe to the detriment of other things. So be careful what you measure. Make sure you carefully pick the right things and you measure them in an appropriate fashion. Easier said than done, I know, but that's the advice of the day. All right, so this concludes chapter 10.